What's up guys, Dutogiraikonoka here, coming to you with an update for the deck primer for Emperor Velen, or as my variant is specifically called, Dragon Lord Velen. So, the variant you see right now is the one I have in Hearthpwn, one Loot Hoarder instead of Thalnos, because I don't have Thalnos because I'm a scrub. But, basically, I'm just giving you guys a Season 15 and Season 14 update because I did make some modifications to the deck after the heavy aggro meta of Season 13. So, let's just jump right into the basic card choices of the deck. First of all, you run Holy Smite. This is a deck that tries to win via a ridiculous amount of spell damage generated by Prophet Velen, and therefore running spells like Holy Smite means they're not only useful as early tempo cards, but Holy Smites are very, very useful for comboing damage onto the face, especially given that Priest has exactly two cards that cost 2 mana or under that deal direct damage, Mind Blast and Smite. So, if you're running a burst damage to the face deck, Smite's an auto-include. Power Word Shield's in here because this is a combo deck, you need card draw, and Power Word Shield is one of the best forms of card draw in the game, because it is very cheap, auto-replaces, and does something that honestly you would probably spend 1 mana to do anyway, because it's like healing a minion for half the cost. Northshire Cleric is here because, again, card draw. Every source of card draw you can get. Very good. And Northshire is a well-known, high-quality priest card draw source, so there you go. The deck runs a Singleton Twilight Whelp because he acts as a dragon, and if you get a really convenient start hand, I suppose I would phrase it as, he can be a 1-mana 2/3. So, given that he has potential to open up as a zombie chow, and still stays relevant in the late game by acting as a dragon to trigger dragon text from your hand on Blackwing Technician, he's good as a one-of. So yeah. The deck obviously runs 2 Mind Blast because that's part of the combo to deal 20 damage, Velen double Mind Blast. The deck normally runs Blood Mage Thalnos. I have Loot Hoarder instead because I'm a pleb. But there you go. It also shows to you guys that Loot Hoarder is a viable replacement for Blood Mage Thanos. I've hit Legend twice with this deck. I'm working on the third one right now, and Loot Hoarder's done just fine. The deck currently runs 2 Shadow Word Deaths. This is just to deal with a slightly slower meta. Runs 2 Velen's Chosens. When you run cards like Northshire Cleric, the latter Acolytes of Pain, and things like Deathlord, Velen's Chosen just has great synergy with the deck. It allows extra card draw from the Acolytes of Pain. It permits super beefy Deathlords, and if you put a Northshire with a Velen's Chosen out early on in the game, it's basically game over because you will generate card advantage every turn, and you have this minion that can remove anything up to and including a Shredder. So, it's ridiculously strong. As I said, the deck runs Acolyte of Pain. It's a great source of card draw and synergizes well with Velen's Chosen. It runs Blackwing Tech because this is a deck that draws a lot of cards anyway. Why not run dragons that work really well with card draw? And because you draw so many cards, and are likely to have a dragon as a result of that, you can run a really powerful 3-drop. Which is only powerful assuming you can draw the dragons you need. It works. Just because you have so much card draw, you're likely to have dragons. It's just a strong 3-drop. Yeah. Good for tempo. The deck runs Deathlord because big, beefy 3-mana 2/8. If you want to stall out for combo time, Deathlord's great for that. Given that you have card draw, you'll likely have something like Velen's Chosen. And a Singleton Deathlord can run away with the game if your opponent's hand cannot deal with it. So, that's that. The deck runs Twilight Drake because Twilight Drake is absolutely ridiculous in terms of its high synergy with card draw. Usually when this deck plays it, it is a 4-mana 4/7 to 4/8. Which is ridiculously strong. That takes it even out of Fireball range for a 4-drop, and that is arguably better than a Shredder. On top of that, it's a dragon, so there you go. The deck runs 2 Holy Novas. Again, this is just a ridiculously strong card in this deck because the deck has a lot of spell damage. You have Velen's Chosen. Normally you would have Blood Mage Thalnos. You've got Azure Drake. Holy Novas can wipe some pretty beefy boards. And so, yeah, they're also useful for just, in addition to clearing, damaging your opponent that little bit. It's like a hidden bit of damage that your opponent is never going to realize is actually bringing them closer and closer to being dead. So, Holy Nova is just all around good. It's a good priest card. Doesn't need that much explanation, but there you go. The deck runs 2 Azure Drakes because, first of all, it's a dragon. Second of all, spell damage. Third, draws a card when it comes into play. And fourth, not bad stats for a 5-drop, but given that it is everything this deck could possibly want rolled into one minion, it is a perfect logical fit for this deck. The deck runs a Light Bomb because, God, there is nothing I hate more than losing to a Handlock who floods on Giants or an Echo Mage. So, there you go. Light Bomb is just a good way to clear boards, also works well against Druids. So, good card, just to be running in the deck. The deck runs Emperor Tharazon because Emperor Tharazon is a critical combo component. If you do not have him, do not try to play the deck. It will not work. Emperor Tharazon reduces the cost of cards in your hand. This is what enables you to play Prophet Velen and 2 Mind Blasts in one turn. As long as at least one of the components is hit, you can deal the 20 damage combo. So, one second, there we go. The deck also runs Prophet Velen, because again, Prophet Velen's a critical combo component, and the deck runs Alexstrasza because Alexstrasza is 1, a dragon, and 2, sets your hero's health to 15. So, the nice thing about setting your opponent's health to 15 is that the most that any deck can do to remove Alex and heal in one turn is a big game plus heal bot. Priest does not run big game, and well, Priest doesn't usually run Healbot and never runs Big Game because they have Shadow Word Death. So what that means is the most that any one deck can do to heal after being Alexed is 8 health in one turn. And even as a Priest, you're not going to see the mystical... I mean, I guess it's technically possible to have Death, Healbot, double Light of the Naru, and heal for 14 and go back up to 29. But that's so unlikely that I wouldn't bother playing around it. Regardless, Alexstrasza is a dragon, so that's good. And given that a deck can only heal for 8 health in one turn after being Alexed, that puts their health cap up at 23 health. What that means is that if you hold a Smite to use for the combo, or you have spell damage on the board when you combo off, your damage ceiling is at 24 damage. That's more than 23, and therefore you can combo someone no matter what they do after you Alex them. So that's why we run Alex. Alex just puts people back in their place. To get into kind of the swaps that you could use for this deck. I've tried a lot of different iterations of this deck. It is possible to swap out Deathlord for Defender of Argus. What this has the effect of doing is strengthening the deck's aggro matchups, not because Defender of Argus is actually all that much better of a taunt wall. In fact, Deathlord and Argus usually provide about the same health reprieve, meaning that even though Deathlord has less health than an Argus is likely to provide in taunts, when it comes out, since Argus will hit 2 minions, you'll usually get at least 10 health's worth of taunts out of Argus. Deathlord just has 8. The thing about Deathlord is because he comes out so much sooner, he gets to deal with the early game minions and you can heal him, so his health actually ends up being quite a bit higher than it looks to be. So it's not that Deathlord is a less effective taunter than Argus. Argus is just better in the aggro matchups because he plays around secrets very well. If your opponent runs Freezing Trap because he's a hunter scumbag, that's fine. Argus. Even more health from taunts. If your opponent is a mage who decides he wants to try to block you with Mirror Entity, that's fine. Giving him a Deathlord feels a lot worse than giving him a Defender of Argus and then getting super taunt minions. That's fine. So Argus just plays really well around secrets, which are pretty commonplace in most forms of aggro these days. And against other aggro decks that don't run secrets, like Zoo and Mech Shaman, it really doesn't matter which of the two you run, they both sit there and kind of mess with the opponent. I personally prefer Argus against Zoo, just because Deathlord has that drawback, and Zoo players have an annoying tendency to always have Power Overwhelming plus Abusive Sergeant. And then pull Doomguard or Mal'Ganis or something ridiculous. For those of you who don't like Deathlord, Argus is a good substitution in general. I do like Deathlord a little bit more against some of the more mid-range decks, like Druids, Rogues, Paladins, those kinds of decks, just because Deathlord does come out sooner, and it doesn't give those decks the opportunity to sap your largest taunt minion. really. Because Deathlord is a lot cheaper, one, and comes out with Taunt, two. If, like, a rogue saps one of your minions with Taunt, like a big ol' 5/10 Twilight Drake the Dream, when you replay that Twilight Drake, sure, he might be a, like, 4/10 now. But he won't have Taunt. The Taunt's gone. So, there's the trade-off between the two. Another thing you can do is drop a Shadow or Death and a Light Bomb to put in Nat Pagal and either a Twilight Whelp or a Kazan Mystic, depending on whether you're seeing more Zoo and Mech Shaman or whether you're seeing more Face Hunter, Mid-Range Hunter, and Tempo Mage, meaning the Twilight Whelp against the Kazan. And what this does is it makes the deck a lot quicker. It makes it stronger in aggro matchups, just because these slower removal cards in aggro matchups are never going to actually be used. If you're light bombing a Face Hunter or a Tempo Mage, they've already beat you. You've let them get to a big board by turn 6 that you actually need to light bomb. That means your health is going to be so low that you're just going to get fireballed, frostbolted, Antonitis, just faced out by a Face Hunter. Stuff like that will happen, so you need earlier game advantage. And that's what this deck can shift into. So yeah, on top of that, you'll note that you're dropping 2 spells for 2 minions. Given that Argus is a lot more useful against a lot of these faster decks, because he doesn't have the drawback of a Deathlord, but again, we've been over that. Because the deck now runs more minions, you're going to have more targets for Argus to get off a turn 5, or not turn 5, turn 4 Argus on 2 minions. So, that change is really good for helping in the aggro matchups. The deck can also swap Twilight Drake for Dragonkin Sorcerer. I've heard of some people who have decided to play this deck having success with that. I personally don't like that change. Usually Twilight Drake, to me, like, at worst, he's a Twilight Yeti. At best, he's already like a Dragonkin Sorcerer plus a Power Word Shield just for being played from the hand, and that's ridiculously strong. Whereas Dragonkin Sorcerer needs to be hit with Velen's Chosen, needs to be hit with Power Word Shield. And if you hit a Twilight Drake with Velen's Chosen, just like if you hit a Dragonkin Sorcerer, sure, Dragonkin Sorcerer turns into a 6/10. If you play even a 4/6 Twilight Drake and hit it with Velen's Chosen, that does the exact same thing as Dragonkin Sorcerer, but you start with much higher base stats, which I think makes Twilight Drake a little bit superior. That said, I know that some people prefer the Dragonkin Sorcerer. I haven't heard anything from the people who play this way saying that running Dragonkin Sorcerer significantly seems to worsen the deck. So, that is more just a stylistic choice, but I believe Twilight Drake to be the stronger of the two. I've also gotten a lot of questions about people asking about not having Prophet Velen or not having Alexstrasza and using Malygos instead. If you don't have Prophet Velen, honestly, I don't think you should be trying to run this deck. This is a Velen-centric deck, and not having Velen and trying to play Velen combo is like not having Giants and trying to play Handlock. So, yeah. However, on the front of Alexstrasza being swapped out for Malygos, this is a change I experimented with a little bit. Alex, in my opinion, is still a little bit superior. Malygos is useful against something like a Control Warrior, because if you can run him out of Shield Slams on things like your Twilight Drakes, and on just other minions, and then you drop Malygos, a Warrior will have a hard time removing it. And if you can stick a Malygos for a turn against really just any deck, and then maybe even Velen combo the next turn, literally one Mind Blast will deal, 20 damage from one Mind Blast? And a Holy Smite will deal 14? So you just need Prophet Velen Mind Blast Smite, and you've already dealt 34 damage just from having stuck Malygos for a turn, because Velen does double spell damages. So yeah. Malygos can be used instead of Alexstrasza, but I like Alexstrasza more because Alex has an instant effect on the board when it comes into play. But I understand that Malygos is a little bit stronger against specifically Control Warrior and no other class, because Control Warrior, having their health set to 15 if they have 20 armor, still puts them really far up. So, Malygos would be better against Control Warriors. As to general tips to playing this deck, because a lot of people have told me that they have a little bit of problems climbing with this deck. They've seen other people have success with it, but they don't know what they're doing wrong. First of all, The biggest difference between someone who knows how to use the deck and doesn't know how to is someone who is stingy with smites. Be very, very stingy with those smites. The only times that I would ever use smite is if I were to have, like, turn 1 Northshire, turn 3 give it Velen's Chosen, and now turn 4 my opponent played a Shredder, so I smite it in response. And get rid of that Shredder, kill off whatever comes out, and heal the Northshire. Maybe against a Druid or something, that happens. I don't know. Somebody coins out a Shredder. I'm not sure exactly the situation you would end up in there. But a very early game tempo smite against something like a Shredder or against an early Knife Juggler is acceptable. Do not be using smite to remove minions in the late game. The point of the matter is it's much stronger to be used against the face. If you are to use smite as removal, you are sacrificing anywhere from 4 to 6 extra face damage. And in a combo deck, that's usually exactly the amount that you'll end up needing to kill your opponent. Against control warriors, do not smite at all. You save the smite for the face, because that is the only way you will win. So yeah, smites are actually a lot more valuable than just tempo removal. They are powerful combo components and need to be treated as such. Especially because if you hit smite with Emperor Tharzan, it becomes 0 mana. It is literally free damage. So, really be stingy with those smites. Additionally, the first few turns of playing any game that is not like a heavy aggro matchup like Face Hunter or something like that, if you can help it, do not play cards which do not draw you cards either upon taking damage or dying. So, you shouldn't be playing like Northshire Clerics to the field early if you're not against like a Face Hunter or maybe a Tempo Mage when you have Velen's Chosen follow-up, then you can go ahead and play that. But as a general rule against most decks, do not just throw out early Northshires. Those are sources of card draw, and if you lose them, not only have you just lost a card from your hand, you've lost a future card in your hand, too, from playing that Northshire and healing to draw. Be stingy with your card draw in playing it. Playing things like Loot Hoarder or Thalnos, well, okay, Thalnos is an exception. Against a lot of the slower decks, you want to save Thalnos, because getting him hit by Tharzan usually can increase your damage by as much as a smite, if not more. But, like Acolyte of Pain. Sure, you can throw Acolyte of Pain out if it looks like your opponent doesn't have a way to just one-shot the Acolyte. You can throw Loot Hoarder out literally whenever because it doesn't matter. Loot Hoarder just gets killed off. If your opponent hero powers, he spent 2 mana to deal with your 2 mana card. And you didn't even lose card advantage from it because you draw a new card. So that's not a problem. Throwing out, you know, cards like that in the first 3 turns of the game. Just try not to play cards that could be a source of card draw but will get removed very efficiently. Another classic example is if your opponent is a Zoo player and he goes second. One sec. Nope, don't care about that number. He goes second. And what he does is he, on turn 1, plays Flame Imp, coins a Voidwalker. If you're running the Pagel build, don't play Pagel. I shouldn't have to tell people that, but don't play the Pagel. Like, there you go. A classic exception to these rules is Deathlord and Blackwing Technician if you can trigger Dragon Text. So, on turn 3, if you have a Blackwing Tech that has Dragon Text, yeah, throw that out there. Your opponent's not removing it, you'll be fine. If you have a Deathlord on turn 3 and your opponent doesn't look like he has a way to kill it off instantly, sure, throw that out turn 3 too. That's fine. But really be careful with those Northshires on turn 1 above all things, and with Acolytes that could be removed by an Eaglehorn Bow, or a Fiery War Axe, or a Dark Bomb, or a Wrath. There's a lot of things that can happen. Just be careful with your card draw. It is precious. You're a combo deck. Touching on the concept of playing Blackwing Tech, though. Do not play Blackwing Tech if you cannot trigger Dragon Text. I don't care who you're playing against. Face Hunter or not. Don't play Blackwing Tech without Dragon Text. Because you are just... Your hand size, assuming you don't have a dragon, is likely to be very small. Either that or it's late game and your hand is stuffed full of combo components and you're just waiting to draw Tharzan who's bottom fragging. But if you can't trigger Dragon Text on the Blackwing Tech, your hand is likely close to empty. That means when you finally do draw into a dragon, which could be a Twilight Drake, that Twilight Drake is going to be weak. Weak. Don't do it. Be willing to hold cards, because having cards in hand is a very powerful thing for this deck. So, Try to be careful about that. Furthermore, there are times when you will draw 2 Blackwing Techs and a Twilight Drake, and you have a reasonable hand. You have a pretty big hand by turn 4. You play a Blackwing Tech turn 3, you've still got 7 cards in hand turn 4. And you want to play that Twilight Drake because 4/7. But you have another Blackwing Tech and no other dragon in hand. Throw out the Blackwing Tech. That Twilight Drake isn't shrinking, and he's your only dragon in hand anyway. If you want to play him, get rid of your second tech. Now you don't have any reason to hold dragons. There is no dragon techs to save them for. You can throw dragons out there. It's fine. Play the dragon text minions when you can. Because playing the dragons and then hoping to draw into dragons in the future is just not going to work out. I've tried it. It fails. I've tried playing this deck every which way. So, trust me when I say that's not the greatest idea. Furthermore, whenever possible, try to use your minions to remove your opponent's minions. Do not use spells. And if possible, like, if there's a situation where you could use maybe a Velen's Chosen Death Lord plus a Holy Nova to remove something like a Doom Guard. Or you could just death the Doom Guard and go face. Play it slow. Use the Holy Nova, remove the Doom Guard, save the death for something else, because this deck's removal suite is slight. And so using minions to remove your opponent's minions is ideal. Using weaker spells like Holy Nova to remove minions is second best. Using your big heavy hitters, your deaths, your light bombs, that is not a good idea. That is a panic button. So, try to be... The theme, really, the larger theme you can see that is happening throughout this deck is be stingy with your cards. Those cards that have high value, like Smite, Death, etc., try to be stingy with them. Because if you can't be stingy, you can't win. So, let's get on into this deck's matchups, and I will have to pull up the Hearthstone page for this deck real quick to do that. Because I do not have every matchup memorized by heart. Okay, so let's go on down. The matchups that this deck is favored in, it's favored against Dragadin, and yes, I did play this when Dragadin was coming out. It's favored against Midrange Paladin, and both to the same degree. That is, I kid you not, an 87% win rate matchup. You absolutely destroy Paladins, and the reason for this is that Paladins, regardless of whether you play Argus or Deathlord, just the fact that you play high health minions like Twilight Drake, you play Blackwing Tech, which dodges True Silver, you play just this suite of stronger minions, and the fact that Paladin does not tend to kill that quickly, and even when he tries, it's with the Dink army, maybe at 3 health. Okay, spell damage Holy Nova, you cleared the Dink army. The point of the matter is, Paladin doesn't have a good way to actually fully remove large minions. He just kind of calms them down with an Aldor Peacekeeper. And that's not good enough against this deck, because you will Velen's Chosen, or the minion still has spell damage, or whatever happens. Paladin just doesn't have a good way to answer these minions. Yes, he could Equality Conk, but most Paladins only run 1 Equality, and they don't mulligan for it against Priests. So, there you go. Second to that is Face Hunter, which is an 83% win rate matchup. Yeah. Face Hunters just don't like this deck either. They don't like having to run through Death Lords. They don't like a deck that has a lot of card draw, and therefore always has the answer to its minions. Especially if you make the Kazan and Defender of Argus changes, where you now have a potential 4 taunt minions from Argus instead of just the 2 of Deathlord, then the matchup becomes almost unlosable. In over 27 matches, I lost only 3 to Face Hunter, which should tell you just how ridiculous the Paladin matchup is too, but still. The Handlock matchup's really favored at 75%. The reason for this is Handlocks just always sit within combo range. You can leave them around 20 health, and they can't play Molten Giants and do any of their fancy combo stuff that Handlocks do. But since they're at 20, they're well within combo range anyway. They could be up at 24 and you just wham, gone, erase them. And you can keep up with a Handlock in card draw because of the ridiculous number of cards this deck draws. I should say that the Handlock and Face Hunter matchups are slightly skewed, because you're not going to see those decks having that kind of matchup with the list that I have sitting right here. Actually, you know what, let me go ahead. Because I have the deck list up at the side, what I can do is just really quickly go ahead and make the other variant, so you guys can see what the other variant looks like. Throw in a Kazan, and what am I missing? A second Loot Hoarder. Right, because I don't have Pagel either. I'm a pleb. Where is it? Loot Hoarder. Okay. There's that. So, the Handlock and Face Hunter matchups are kind of skewed, and the reason for this is that the Face Hunter matchup is assuming the build that is closest to me right here. The Handlock matchup is assuming the build that is further over there, if you get what I mean. So, the reason that I'm willing to put those statistics out there in that manner is that Face Hunter and Handlock do not exist in tandem in metas. They are counters to each other, basically. And in a meta where Face Hunter is prominent, Handlock will not be. In a meta where Handlock is prominent, Face Hunter will not be. There you go. Similarly, Tempo Mage is at a 70% win rate. I only say this because Tempo Mage and Handlock don't mix. Face Hunter and Tempo Mage do, though. And the build right here counters both Face Hunter and Tempo Mage to a ludicrous degree. So, that should be a good matchup. That said, if you are to use the build over there against a Tempo Mage, you will notice that it is significantly worse and the matchup falls closer to a 50-50, depending on whether or not the Tempo Mage opens up with Mana Worm. Mech Shaman, Mech Mage, Overload Shaman, Oil Rogue, Control Priest, and Grim Patron Warrior are all around a 66% win rate. Patron Warrior is ridiculously favored because if you're running Thalnos, you have a really strong way to clear the board with spell damage Holy Novas. If you're running the Light Bomb variant of this deck, then you have another further way to clear Grim Patrons. But on top of that, you do have these big beefy taunt minions, and because you have so many buffs in this deck with Argus, if you're running him, with Velen's Chosen, you have ways to keep your minions above 3 attack, or at 3 attack, so that the Patron Warrior never has minions to combo his patrons off against. That means that he's never getting off these huge battle rages to draw cards. He's just not going to draw as much as you are, and you can often just combo him down sooner. Because you take the tempo advantage, get him low, and then just finish him. Now that said, it is only a 2 and 3 for the Patron Warrior, because sometimes the Patron Warrior just goes off with Frothing Berserkers like an idiot and combos you for 44 in one turn, because somehow that's not broken. And that's coming from a guy who combos Control Warriors for 36 in one turn. So, yeah. The other 66% matchups, Mech Shaman, Mech Mage, that's just by virtue of the fact that this deck was built to counter aggro decks, and it does that reasonably well, regardless of the build. Overload Shaman / mid-range Shaman is a favored matchup, just because those Shaman decks, again, are a little slower in nature, and the fact that this deck runs so much card draw means that you have a decent chance to combo him off before he can kill you. Yes, Shamans are a little bit worse of a matchup than mid-range Paladin, but the decks play similarly. The only reason Overload Shaman is all that much stronger is it has Hex instead of Aldor Peacekeeper, so it actually can remove some large minions. Oil Rogue is stated as favored. It really just depends on how quickly your opponent draws into weapon buffs and blade flurries. If he's just, every time you build up a board that even resembles a large board, he just instantly, boom, builds up a weapon, smacks, clears, every time you come close, then he will win. The majority of the time, though, an Oil Rogue does not have enough weapon buffs in his start hand in the first 10 cards to just clear a board that has more than one minion above 8 health. Like, you'd need double Deadly Poison, Prep, Tinker Oil, Hit, Blade Flurry, and that's a 5-card combo. It's very unlikely. So, normally, Oil Rogue's fine. Control Priest is a favored matchup because of Alex. A Priest can't heal out of combo range in time, and Priest is a slower deck. You'll notice a lot of the decks that I'm saying are favored do not kill all that quickly. So, there you go. Freeze Mage is a I should actually say this. All of the matchups I stated previously are categorized as being favored. To get onto the relatively even matchups, we have Freeze Mage. Freeze Mage is a very tricky matchup. I state it as a relatively even matchup because it is assuming that you are running the Light Bomb variant of the deck. Freeze Mage usually is not that prominent in metas where you will be running this deck. Normally you will see Freeze Mage if you are running this one. This one has a 95% win rate against Freeze Mage because it has Kazan Mystic, which is ridiculously strong against Freeze Mage. And on top of that, even when you don't draw the Kazan, you can usually maneuver yourself into a position where just using Mind Blasts, even prior to combo, to get your opponent down to 1 health, and then holding a spell in hand every turn to threaten to kill the Freeze Mage, you can run him out of answers really quickly. You can just keep him on the ropes, keep him guessing, and kill him off that way. This is a 95 though, because sometimes you just play Kazan and kill him, instead of having to go through that process, which this deck has to go through, of trying to outwit the Freeze Mage by barely not killing him every turn. So there you go. That's Freeze Mage. I put it as relatively even because even though this deck is 95, this deck is more of a 50-50, and so it balances out to be around a 66% win rate. You can get the 50-50 a little higher if you really know what you're doing with this deck, but for someone who's going to be using this in the near future to ladder, expect around a 50-50 from Freeze Mage. As to mid-face, slash, as I've been calling it, Nose Hunter, that face hunter and mid-range hunter hybrid, you've actually got a 60% win rate. The fact that this deck has a lot of powerful taunts means that you can deal with the face hunter aspect of that deck. You can take freezing traps. Mid-face is only prominent in those metas that already run face hunter and tempo mage and such, so you're likely to use this variant if you're running into mid-face at all. So, yeah. Even then, the other variant over here still has Deathlord to deal with that kind of stuff, and mid-face doesn't actually have as much damage buffs as Face Hunter does, and so it actually struggles even more with Deathlord than Face Hunter. That said, it does run a more powerful late game, and so it's harder to deal with. That's why the matchup win rate is lower. It's still favored, but it's a little lower. Then there is Zoo. Zoo is actually around a 45% win rate. The problem with Zoo and why its win rate is so low is that often Zoo, or the mid-range Demon Lock variant that has kind of popped up, it's like a Zoo mid-range fusion. It's a terribly powerful deck that I don't like, but is good. The reason why that win rate is so low is that you're likely to run into that deck using this thing. And that's arguably okay, sort of. But the point of the matter is that, again, this deck runs Deathlord. And if a Zoo player is to use like Power Overwhelming and another Power Overwhelming or double Abusive Sergeant, or just has a Flame Imp and Power Overwhelming, Abusive Sergeant, and a Nerubian Egg, and kills off your Deathlord, he's likely to pull a relatively powerful minion out of his deck, on top of now having a 4/4 Nerubian and an Abusive Sergeant. When you run Deathlord in a deck, and a Zoo player kills it off, he just takes the game because you have lost tempo. And this deck is not amazing at recovering tempo. You need a Light Bomb ASAP, probably followed by a Holy Nova almost immediately. So, the fact that you run Deathlord is actually really bad against Zoo, and causes the Zoo matchup to be really bad. Okay, I just said really bad too many times there. Forgive me for that, but you get the point. Yeah. You have, then this variant, which is actually closer to a 60% win rate against Zoo. And the reasoning for that is that you have Defender of Argus, you have bigger minions, and Zoo doesn't actually tend to remove this deck's massive minions all that easily. So, better matchup there, but you're more likely to be using this deck when you run into Zoo, not this one. So there you go. Mid-range Druid's then around a 40%. The point of the matter is that mid-range Druid can go faster than you because of Wild Growth. On top of that, they have Keeper of the Grove to recover from Twilight Drakes. Druid is just the natural counter to this deck as classes go. At least excluding Warrior. Druid's the second best counter. I'll put it that way. So, yeah, mid-range Druid, regardless of what you're using. If you're using this variant, great. Now you've got a dead Kazan minion sitting in your deck. that's just a 4-3 inferior to a Shredder. Regardless of the fact that you use Argus, he'll just silence your really big minions and then push through his combo on you instead of you being able to push yours onto him. On top of that, if you were to run this variant, okay, now you've got a little bit better recovery with Light Bomb, but you need Light Bomb really badly, and that second death is rarely going to see use, because you're going to only be using it to remove like 5/5s at best, which you already could be doing with minions. So, yeah. Mid-range Druid can go faster than you, and yeah. It combos sooner than you. What can I say? In terms of bad matchups, your really bad matchups come from Control Warrior. Surprise, surprise, because Control Warrior gets so much armor. And that's really as far as it goes. If you're running this variant, which you're likely to be doing actually in a Control Warrior meta, then Deathlord will further lose you games, because if a Control Warrior has Execute or Shield Slam up, and the power to kill off a Deathlord, you just can't play the Deathlord, because he will remove it with startling efficiency and then regain tempo. And once a Control Warrior starts to out-tempo you, he doesn't stop. He kills you. Period. So, you have to actually flood against a Control Warrior without him brawling your board away, so that you never lose tempo and then combo him, which is really difficult to do given that he has Brawl, a large removal suite, and weapons. The weapons work against him a little bit because he still takes damage removing minions, but a removed minion is a removed minion. So Control Warrior is easily this deck's hardest matchup. Your win rate Your win rate against Control Warrior should be around 20% to 30%, depending on how well you've learned to hold those smites. I have found that around a 30% can be obtained if you're holding smites. The really old version of mid-range Demon Lock that ran Jiraxis along with Mal'Ganis and was really almost close to a Demon Handlock. Yeah, that variant is also really bad for you just because of Mal'Ganis. Usually they will force you to use deaths early on things like Doom Guards, Dread Infernals, and the like, and then just drop a Mal'Ganis when you can't answer him. And now that he's invulnerable, you can't combo him either. So that creates a pretty bad matchup. That said, that variant of Demon Lock has kind of died out just because against most other decks it is actually worse than Handlock and worse than the Malagos Lock that's out. And then you have Mid-Range Hunter at 33%, because unless you're running this variant, the one over here just sucks against Mid-Range Hunter because you're never going to end up getting a lot of value off of those deaths. You can't handle Freezing Trap, etc., etc. He has relatively large minions. If you're running this variant, you have a chance, and it brings the matchup closer to 50-50, but for the most part, the metas that I have been seeing of late reflect this deck, and not this one. But, yeah, it just kind of depends. So if you see an aggro-heavy meta, this deck is better. More of a control-heavy meta, this one's better. But the problem with Mid-Range Hunter is it's strongest in control metas, which is when you'll be using this one. Sad days for the kingdom. One thing, actually I have to update my Hearthpwn page, in addition to using this video as the Season 15 primer. I do need to throw in the new Malagos Combo Lock deck as a matchup. That deck is actually a little bit less favored than Handlock. It's about another 60% win rate. Again, Handlock, or not, just any sort of Handlock style deck is going to pretty much always be within combo range. And you can keep up with a Handlock card for card with the ridiculous amount of card draw that this deck runs. So, that said, given that your combo usually happens earlier than the Malagos combo does, and combos for more damage, you tend to win that matchup. But it's not always guaranteed. The fact that Malagos Lock runs heal bots, if he's intelligent, doesn't tap too much, and keeps his health floating just above 25 every time that you could potentially combo him, he's likely going to beat you. But that requires a good draw from him so that he doesn't have to tap too much to bring himself so low that you can combo him, and requires that he knows what he's playing against. And very few people respect the combo right now from Priest. So, still, all in all, should be a 60% win rate if the Malagos Lock knows what he's playing against. If he doesn't, closer to 70, but can't rely on that. So, those are the matchups. Those are what this deck is good for. Yeah. If you're looking for a mulligan guide, that will be on the Hearthpwn page. If you're watching this on YouTube, I guess I'll have to link it in the description. If you're seeing this on Hearthpwn, scroll down. Scroll down, fool. So yeah. Anyway, thank you guys for watching this very long-winded, but rather thorough description of the deck, I should hope, given that it's 40 minutes long. And, yeah. Thank you guys for watching. If you enjoy my content, please subscribe on YouTube, follow on Twitch. The links are over there. Oh wait, there. There's that one and that one. Yeah, you guys can see them. But yeah, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care.